Everyone dreams about living an uncommon life, but how we define that dream is very different for each of us. And for most, it's a lifelong pursuit. Welcome to the Uncommon Life Project podcast. We're going to introduce you to people who are living that life or enjoying the journey to get there. We're going to also give you some tools, tricks, and tips for starting or accelerating your own efforts to live an uncommon life, a life worth celebrating and savoring. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Dewhurst and Philip Ramsey.
Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Uncommon Life Project, where I'm your host, Philip Ramsey.
And I am Brian Dewhurst.
Brian's hair looks amazing today. I wish you could see it in studio.
I don't get that very often.
But today is one of those days.
Having a day.
It's good. I can't wait to introduce our guest. I'm just going to introduce you to your new best friend, okay? That's what I'm going to do, but let's have Brian talk about it because he's way sexier in his voice.
No, I go into radio voice when I do the bio, so I got to kind of try to, unify the voice. We've got the one, the only, Tyler Kammerman.
Whoop, whoop.
He is the founder and creator of Pursue Your Passion podcast, married to a lovely woman, 2 kids, content creator, actor, voiceover specialist, and
your new best friend.
Your new best friend.
Come on.
Tyler Kammerman. I know. Where's our stinking sound effects?
We got to upgrade this
What
year.
is happening?
I need to do that on my show too. The button where there's clapping in the background.
Yep.
Laugh track, maybe.
I wonder if nobody else likes that except for us. When I
Probably.
hear it, I'm like, oh, what's happening? But if I was the one clicking the buttons, I'd feel like that's pretty cool. Okay. So I want to just flat out say that Tyler is the guy that I started this industry with, which is pretty sweet. We're pretty much brothers now.
Yeah.
And best friends.
Principal brothers.
Principal brothers. There's not a lot of people that say
PFG, baby.
PFG brothers. So Tyler and I started the industry at the same time. And what I can tell you about Tyler is he's super uncommon. And we have a fellow, I would say, a unified passion of trying to pull things out of people and get the best out of people. Yeah. Try to get them to pursue their passion.
Yeah.
And he started a podcast called Pursue Your Passion.
Yes.
I cannot wait to hear what you've learned, because it's not that long of a show. It hasn't been out too long.
Right.
So what's like one thing that, don't answer this yet.
Okay.
Right, we're going to really tease this out.
Perfect.
Well, I want to know what's been a common theme throughout, because I feel like our podcast is a little similar, not as good as Tyler's in full disclosure.
For sure.
But I want to know little things. And I feel like Tim Ferriss kind of has the same kind of vision of us, as interviewing awesome people who are dominating at life. Basically our show. I don't need to tease it out anymore. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
But Tyler, I want to know all about your history, your family, where you've been, how did you get here? Why are we not working together? Things like that, you know.
Full court press.
Full court press. All right. So the first thing that I have to say though is it's interesting being on the other side of the mic, because I'm used to asking the questions and then listening, and now the questions are getting thrown at me, and I'm like, oh, right, I have to think now, not just listen and
right.
process. So, well, starting the podcast has been awesome, and the first thing that you asked is one of the I guess through lines or some things that I've learned. And one of the questions that I ask is to every guest that's been on the show, I ask, hey, what did you want to be when you grew up? Or, what did 7-year-old Philip or 7-year-old Brian want to do? And that's probably been one of the most fun questions. Yeah. Because, sometimes it's neat because you can draw a correlation from, I had one guy who was like, I wanted to be an artist, and he's, graphic designer and then content creator. So that was super, everything, falls in line. Exactly. Mm-hmm. For a lot of us, especially boys, it's like, I want to be a policeman. I want to be a fireman. Football player. I want to be a professional football player, which
baseball,
is,
yeah,
exactly. And then it's a little harder to draw the correlation. But that has, I'm not actually answering your question, but that's been that's probably one of my most favorite questions to ask, because it also, I think, as the show has started to evolve, and we're just in the beginning evolution stages, right? Because we're only 10 episodes in, but I can see one of the things that I want to help people with is find that passion, if they've already found that, and I am stealing a line from our conversation, how do you monetize that passion?
Right.
You know, but a lot of it is, I think for a lot of people, it's finding that passion, because so many of us, you know, we get out of college or we get out of high school and we go to work, right? And that's what we do, you know, because we have to, and we have to pay our bills, and then we get married and we have kids and blah, blah, blah. And the bills just keep getting higher, right? So we have to
seem to.
Yeah, right.
I don't know how.
So we have to go to work. And I think one of the things that I'm figuring out through this is I want to help people like you find that passion.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, even if what they're doing now doesn't draw a correlation to that question, a lot of times what they're really passionate about does. So that's a question that's going to stick in the podcast for a long time. It might always be there, because I want people to hear what Philip wanted to be when he was 7, what Brian wanted to be when he was 7, because that's going to hopefully get them to start going. And sometimes it's not 7. Another thing that I think was one of you guys, because I've got all these sound bites in my head now, right, is we all know what we want to be, but somewhere along the line, somebody talked us out of it. You know, and so if we can go back to college or high school or 7 to find that thing, that's one of the things you guys talk about, and that's what I'm talking about. I just saw every show
a post on that on Twitter. It was like, if you could have, you know, whatever dollar amount would make you really question yourself, like $1 million or $10 million, whatever, or go be 18 again, what would you choose? I'm like, 18 in a heartbeat.
Wow. I would not choose that at all.
I actually, so I go back, I saw 6 years old, and I'm like, man, I don't want to go through elementary school again. Like 18, ooh, that's a tough one. But I saw the same thing, and I actually probably not wasted, because it was good thoughts. But I spent some time thinking about that, because I'm like, oh, obviously you just go back and you put, I scrape together, or I tell my dad, like, hey, this Amazon thing is going to be big. Like, let's just put 10 grand in that, and then 10 million, who cares?
Boom,
you know,
exactly.
like
that's kind of the way I think I looked at it more so.
Exactly.
Like,
but then I also,
all I need is like Amazon, Tesla, and Bitcoin, and I'm golden.
Oh, exactly. And we're going to be way beyond 10 million, you know? But then I also thought about, like, gosh, what if then I went way too deep down the rabbit hole. And I'm like, well, what if I make this decision and then I never meet Jess, or I make this decision and Ian's never born. And so then I'm like, oh yeah, butterfly effect, ripple effect. Like, so then I kind of shifted back to the 10 million, because I'm like, well, I could clearly live off of $10 million. So
yeah.
There's a little insight into the crazy that is right here.
Well, it's also a little
ears.
insight of Brian's crazy. I liked it.
Well, here, I want to take this even further. Maybe we shouldn't do this. We can
help
always
us all.
edit, but
Help us all.
I've been thinking about it too, because I look at Tom Brady. So I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, like diehard. Yeah. And I was playing at a very high level.
I would say this though too. After that, you wanted to be a financial advisor.
Yeah.
Like, pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like, it was like he came out of the womb, he wanted to be a financial advisor.
It was like baseball,
the baseball
financial advisor
got in the way.
congruent. So it worked. Like, I feel like, I'm like the artist guy you mentioned who's now in graphic design. But, like Brady at 45, it's like, oh my gosh. And so I just hit 40 and I'm like, could I make an effort? So I had an opportunity last year to do like a little home run challenge with Philip with a minor league baseball team. He's like, hey, you can come back this year. And I'm like, what if I could just get a 2-week contract? Maybe I don't play.
Yeah.
But I was just like, there's kind of a path there if I did the work. And I was like, what about like what you wanted to be as a kid? Thinking about it more in the sense of like, was that really the first time you gave up on yourself?
Yeah.
And then as that window is closing, like permanently, like, I'm at 50, I'm not going to be able to do this.
Right.
Baseball thing, maybe at the level I could do it now if I put in the effort.
Yeah.
And so it was just something I've been thinking about as I hit 40 of like, and then when did you start giving up on yourself? You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, two things that come to mind when you say that. So there's a great book, and I'm totally blanking on the name of it, but Ryan Leake is the author, and he's a public speaker. I think he's probably got a podcast too. But God, I'm totally blanking on the name. But
I'll work on it.
But basically, not 40.
Right.
No offense. I mean, I'm older than you, but in his late 20s or early 30s, he was a Division III basketball player, and then he's like, I'm gonna go get a contract. And so like he starts. It's something about failure. Chasing failure. That's the one. And I even read it to my son, because it's all his the premise is like, you have to try to fail, like you have to push, you have to go after something that's so out there that you fail. And so, I mean, he did the work, and he ended up Phoenix Suns let him come for a tryout, and he's got video, he's got YouTube
Wow.
and stuff of him like at the end, and he kind of hung with them, and then he didn't make the cut. But
Right.
it's a great book. It's a quick read. It's, I don't know, hour and a half, something like that. But the other thing that came to my mind that I'm trying to be more intentional about as a parent is I had great parents. My mom's still living. Unfortunately, my dad's not with us anymore. And they were great. They did a great job of raising us kids. But one thing that I think they let me do too much of was be okay with being good when I could have been great. But I think there's a fine line there too, because
Right.
you see the crazy parents
Right.
that are like pushing their kids to extremes, and then
Throwing things at the refs.
right,
and
and
things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I think there's also a point of, hey, I should have been a 4.0 student and in grades or whatever, but I definitely should have been 4.0. Like
Right.
school was easy for me,
Right.
but I didn't have to do anything and I could get B pluses and A minuses, and that was one of those places. I'm hoping that, again, not being critical of my parents, but I'm hoping that I can see that in my kids. And even with, they've both picked up the piano extremely quickly.
Wow.
Not, prodigy level or anything like that, but I can see my son starting to go, oh, this is hard. I'm like, yeah, but if you ever want to play Avett Brothers songs or Ben Folds songs,
Right.
you got
Put in the
to
work.
you got to do the work.
Right.
So that's I think those are two thoughts that popped into my head with
For sure.
what you were saying.
Right.
Yeah, we just watched the Serena Venus Williams movie with, was it King Williams? I
Yeah,
think?
yeah.
And
King
that
Richard.
border, King Richard, yeah.
Yeah.
The border of like crazy and like the best parent,
Obsessed.
like ever though. But and it's somewhat of like the destiny of like those two girls actually had the physical, prowess, stamina to play at that level. He protected them in the ages that was super critical, where most of the other kids went haywire. And yeah, so it was really neat to see that, kind of a tightrope walk as a parent.
Yeah, that's on the list to watch. Did you watch it with your kids, or did you watch it on your own?
No, but I'm going to.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that
Screened
good.
it first.
That's a good
It's probably
call.
Smart. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to pull back because you guys will go on. I feel like we're
went
just
on a
talking
tangent.
on a Friday, which isn't bad. Coffee talk with the boys. Anyway, wanted to go back to principal. So
Sure.
we were advisor together.
Yeah.
It's like the best thing that ever happened to me at principal was Tyler Kamerman, everyone. And I remember just being very like, you and I were always unified. Like, hey, we want to help people bring out the passion in themselves because we believe they were their best asset. Now we've kind of formalized it with Uncommon Wealth, but you've always had this pursuit of trying to like pour into other people to then have them come out and be who they've always wanted to be and get paid for it, which I love. So tell me about your career from the time that you and I departed. So that was the hardest part about me leaving principal was leaving Tyler Kamerman. But then I did, and then I felt like our two paths started kind of going in a different way.
Sure.
And even today, you're still advising people
Yep.
financially, which I think is awesome.
For sure.
So I'll have you talk about that.
Yeah. So I think that's at the heart of what drew me to financial services. Without going too far back, when my dad got sick, it was a rare neurological disease. His short-term memory went first. His long-term memory was fine. And he kind of had things in different places. He lived in a small town. He worked at a bank, but he knew everybody, right? So they were the typical Midwest couple that dad did everything with finances. Mom knew nothing about what was going on, but I took the time and was able to because dad was still there. If he would have had a heart attack and been gone, it would have been a mess because it was like, hey dad, where's the loan for this piece of land is here. Oh, this is, this investment is here, blah, blah, blah. But through the course of a week of going to him, going to the next person, I was able to kind of put that all together. And then we had a meeting with one of their financial advisors. And after dad passed away, she was like, hey, have you ever thought about doing this? And I'm like, no.
Your mom or the other advisor?
No, the advisor was like, hey,
interesting.
have you ever thought about doing this? I'm like, no, I just had my buddy help me allocate my 401k. I don't know anything about this stuff. And she was like, yeah, but you do because you have a passion for helping people figure things out.
care about people.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Totally blew that off, and then like went back to working for, fell back into, building products and then, cut to a year and a half later and meet Mike and, I basically said the same thing to him. Like, I don't know anything about this stuff. I've never tried to be, know finances.
Right.
And, he said, you have a passion for helping other people and for building relationships with people.
Which is the key.
Right. And I can teach you the rest of this stuff. Yeah. And so, for me, it's always been about trying to find how to help them improve. To be frank, it's a little harder working on the private banking side of things because most of my clients are super successful already. Right. Now, there's always, if they're willing to be coached, there's always a place where I can still help them. But I will say I probably got more of that altruistic, I got more of that altruistic value when I was working at Principal because I was helping more people who really wanted the help. Right. And so, I will say that's the question you asked a few minutes ago. One of the things that I'm figuring out by doing this podcast is that it's rekindled that passion for helping other people, 100%. Like re-listening to the programs, talking to other people who are passionate about this. It's like, okay, what can I be doing differently that will bring out the good in people, will help them to see, because you guys talk about it too. It's not always, hey, quit your day job. In fact, a lot of times it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
And the guy that I just had coffee with before this, it was like, hey, a lot of times the passion is outside of that 9 to 5, and a lot of times you're never going to quit that 9 to 5, or sometimes you're not going to quit that 9 to 5. But if that 9 to 5 isn't your passion, let's find you something that is, because that makes you a lot happier at that 9 to 5 job.
It's fueling what you're excited about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
I think we just had this conversation with another client, and he was talking about his mother-in-law, and she wants to retire, but like there's a little bit of a chasm there. You know what I mean? Maybe not necessarily financially, but like I'm not done, but I don't know what to do. So anyway, she's really good at like basically seamstress stuff. And she's done all this custom work for him and updating some clothes. And he's just like, what? You could totally do this and make 10, 20 grand a year and be done and then have this.
The problem is you won't make 10 to 20 grand a year. You'll make like 70 to 90. Does that make sense? Like you've got to be careful, because sometimes what you're passionate about, like you can almost trap yourself into something like, oh, I just want to do this part-time. Well, you're that good. Yeah. Like you just,
I think a lot of people, I guess the point I was trying to make, he was talking about it like they've been talking about this for 5 years, like half a decade has gone by, and it's like, what baby steps could they have taken to maybe formalize this a little bit more than like onesie twosie? And it was a cleaner launch out of the 9 to 5 to this, and she is in that place of passion full time.
Yeah, well, and I love that you said baby steps, because that makes me think of something else back to that kind of original question, like. One of the biggest takeaways from a couple of the people is just go do it. Right. I think too many times we're told, oh, you got to think things out. You have to have a plan. You have to do this. And it's like, no, that's true. But sometimes, especially when it comes to like chasing after a passion, you just got to go after it.
Yep.
and then plan later.
Yeah.
And so there's this, for some people, it's going to be the baby steps. And that triggered that.
Right.
For some people, it's like me, for example. I finished the West Des Moines Leadership Academy, and from stage, they asked us, hey, what were your key takeaways from the program, and how are you going to utilize this going forward? And a lot of the people were like, oh, this is what I'm going to do within the company. And I'm like, hey, what I realized is that I still at 43 worry too much about what other people think of me. So I'm going to work on that. And I said, my key takeaways are, within 3 months, I'm going to start a podcast. Within a year, I'm going to book my first public speaking gig. And within 2 years, I'm going to write a book. I missed the podcast by 1 month.
Okay.
I still
checking it off though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. That one's definitely done, and it's rolling. I have until June to book a public speaking gig. So listeners, if you need a paid speaker,
advertisement,
let's put a quick blurb out there.
Paid sponsor.
Yeah, exactly. So, But I just needed to jump in. Right. Now that the podcast is up and rolling, we're getting some listeners, which is fun.
Good.
Yeah, it's fun. And now I'm like, okay, so this is actually working. So now I'm at the spot where it's like, hey, let's start doing, sorry, I backed away from the mic. Let's start doing some planning, Right. And so for me, it was to just do it and then plan back to your baby steps comment, for other people that are wired differently than me, maybe it's way too scary, even if the just do it isn't that big of a thing. But what are those baby steps that you can be taking to start making this happen?
Right. Yeah. So I want to go back and, one, welcome to your new best friend, Tyler Camerman. And then two, if you were going to speak at some place, what would you want to talk about? You got to give our listeners something to grab onto. What would you talk about?
I think right now it would be about, pursuing your passion, which I know that's super broad, but I also, add a little color to the conversation. Right after college, I moved out to Los Angeles to try to pursue, the film and television industry, which, hey, there's lots of people that do that. But it took some stones, small town Iowa kid, I'm just jumping into the second biggest city in the US. And, I think my experiences, just mine alone, but even just the conversations that I've had through the beginning of this podcast, I could put together a pretty compelling either intro to your event. I think at this point I'm probably still the hype man. I'm not a keynote just yet, but it's interesting though, because when you start breaking that down and the conversations that we're having, one thing that I posted about on Facebook last week was just at the beginning of last year, I was the heaviest that I'd been in my life, and I set a goal to lose 40 pounds. And guess what? I lost 30. I didn't hit my goal, but I'm back to feeling healthy. I'm, I think another thing that I could talk about is routines. How having a morning routine is super important.
What couldn't you talk about, Tyler Camerman? Freaking love you. I want to know this from Brian, just because this is fun. What would you speak about, Brian? I know what I would speak about, so I'll give you a second to think. Mine would be networking. How important networking is, and how much I hate networking. Like, if you ask me to go to a network event, I'm like, hard pass. But how powerful networking has been in my life when done the uncommon way, dare I say it. Yeah. But that would be what I would say of just how important relationships are. The right relationships that are cultivated in a way that is intriguing and inviting. And then people love to help people.
Yes.
It's crazy. And if you're humble enough to be like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good at, I'm going to be really honest, and that was kind of my story of how ultimately I got to this career. But I was without a job for a year, and I didn't apply for one job, not one. And I kept praying, like, God, give me one door to open. I don't need 3. I'm not that smart. But I need one. And I did that by just networking with people that I knew about or I've worked with in the past, and then let them vouch for me to get me in front of somebody else. And it was such a joy for me. Anyway, that's what I'd speak about. I could get on my soapbox, but now it's Brian's turn. What are we speaking about?
Oh, man.
Pitching. Professional pitching.
I have outlined a book on pitching.
Okay.
And I bought the website, and I want to do a podcast.
Oh, dear.
But more like, just 6 people in one day, and that would be it. Not like ongoing.
So good.
I would probably speak about the importance. I think Bitcoin is like one of the most important things, second to Jesus, in the world. And I think a lot of people are approaching Bitcoin of like, how much money can I make, or I'm going to lose money. And it's not about that. It's about, we need to separate the state and money. These politicians are drunk on our money, and it needs to end. And Bitcoin, to me, is the first real solution we've had in the last 100 years, and it's more about that than it is about how much money you can make and preserving the sovereignty in the U.S. So, anyways,
I like it. I'm like, oh, right. Yeah.
You can see the difference between Philip and Brian. Tyler's on my camp, okay?
I probably lean a little. Where I'm sitting on the table, I probably lean a little more right than left. But but that's also I love that thought, because right now
intriguing. Right.
Well, my not to go down the crypto path too far, but I'm still on the how much can I make from it.
Right.
But I've read enough to begin to understand how it can change things. So I think that would be. I'd sit and listen to that speech.
I'm still on. My wife is bigger than crypto, so it's like God and then my wife.
Oh,
but
sure.
But I mean, maybe Brian's different. I don't know. It seems like he is. Sometimes you just got to call it out here at the Hostville. I just love it.
Yeah,
we're great. He didn't really mean that, Megan. You're totally number 2.
On the networking thing, I am not a big fan of networking events,
gosh,
but
I
I
hate it.
love the idea of connecting people. You know, this person does this and this person does this. If I can put them together, I love that. I mean, that's one of my favorite things to do.
Why do you think you hate networking events? I'll tell you why I do, but I want you first.
So I think because too many of the people that go to networking events, all they do is go to networking events, and they have a checklist of things that they're going to ask you or tell you every time they come up and talk to you.
They'll
And-
want something from you.
Exactly.
I don't
and
have
that's
any time for that.
That's the way that most networking books, seminars, blah, blah, blahs are set up, is you have to have an agenda if you're going to network well.
Right.
And I understand that I am much more comfortable talking to people than a lot of people are. Like, I understand that that's a talent of mine that I was blessed with, but that I've also improved upon myself. So I get that I'm more comfortable in that situation than most people. But for me, networking is about getting to know you, understanding what your strengths and talents are.
Yeah.
And then that's how I can promote you to other people.
Right.
And hopefully how you can promote me to other people, not by immediately asking, not by walking away from that conversation by saying, oh, sweet, I've got this meeting set up because I asked for this.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's really off-putting to me. Sorry. But it's just, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tyler Cameraman, what questions can we ask you? Because I feel like you're a wealth of knowledge and I just want to pull it all out. Maybe we do 7 more shows with you.
Okay.
Only you.
Yeah.
Every Friday.
Every Friday.
Same time, same place. I want to say this. Who out of all your guests you've interviewed up to this point has been your like aha moment or like not favorite, but like the thing that struck you the most? Because I would say in every podcast that Brian and I have, we always are like, I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
Or,
Every time.
Yeah.
every time.
That's a really hard question. So I will say one of my first aha moments. How about that? I might give you
Okay.
more. I might give you more than one.
Basically, what I'm asking is like all your guests were hanging off a cliff. Who would you save first? I'm totally kidding.
Well, clearly Brian Dewhurst and Philip Ramsey.
We have been on the show, so he had to answer that way.
My first big aha moment was in the very first episode, and I was interviewing Adam Carroll, who I know you guys know as well, and I asked him the 7-year-old question that I've already, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he talked about how he said an entertainer, and he had a comedy routine that he had memorized that he would perform for his family and extended family as well.
Wow.
And he said, I think that's probably still what that drives me, and I just went, oh my gosh, I've been chasing this acting thing, and I still, don't get me wrong, if a script gets laid in front of me, I will keep doing the
perform.
podcast,
You
but
will perform.
sorry, Bank of the West, I'm out, but it made me realize that I can utilize a podcast, I can utilize a public speaking platform to fulfill that passion in me to entertain people. And I'm like, yes,
Vibrating.
Yeah.
So that was huge. I would say just each one of my episodes, there's been something which has been fantastic. And one thing that I know I've grown through is I listened to the first episode and I listened to my last one, and I'm getting better at interviewing people, which is fun to hear that
It's a
improving
challenge.
as well.
It's a challenge.
It's a learning curve for sure.
Well, because Adam straight up told me after the first episode, like, hey, he said, don't be afraid to drill down. Like, you can have your set of questions, but don't feel like you need to ask them all. And he said, by the way, you were natural enough that it didn't seem like you had a list.
You don't have to reshoot
But
this.
I know you had a list,
Yeah.
And I just, the last episode that we did, I'm like, it's just so much more fluid.
Yeah.
But I will say, feedback wise, and I'm not just saluting the room, but like I got a lot of great feedback on ours, and I think
good.
it was because we really. You said it at the beginning of the show. Your guys' goal, even though you're financial planners, is really almost 100% lockstep with mine, and that is to help people find their passion and then to get them to go after it. And so.
in any capacity, whatever that capacity is.
Exactly.
Not necessarily in quitting your job, but just
Exactly.
making it more concrete.
Yep. And so I think that was it. It was awesome because it was just so aligned with the purpose of the show, and they don't all have to be. I mean, I love talking with people that are passionate about what they're doing, and maybe helping other people isn't their number one thing.
Right.
Like that's fine too. But our conversation was really awesome.
It probably feels to our listeners like we just have another Uncommon Wealth person with us. Honestly, like it's probably like, well, what are we talking about? But like, this is really good stuff. I would love to somehow pool questions of all of our listeners and get in a room and just like throw them on the board. Like, here's a question and have us all answer.
Sure, we can do that sometime.
I think to check off your thing, we should just do an event together, and then you could speak, we could speak.
And you guys could throw me like $5 and then I'm paid.
Boom. That's what we do. Check things off.
Yeah, we've done some events like that in the past, and just getting groups together and, just talk real quick, 20 minutes each, and then open it up. And
what's fascinating to me is this whole, what's your risk tolerance? That has always been 2 words, risk tolerance, have always been in like money in the market.
Yeah.
What is your risk tolerance? And that's something at Uncommon Wealth that we've tried to pull off. And it's like, no, it's not about your money in the market, but what is you as an individual? If you were going to bet on yourself, what is that risk tolerance? And the people that have very, very high risk tolerance, almost speculative, if we will, can quit their job tomorrow and go all in. But that to me is not really what we see the most. It's what we've seen in you of like, I'm going to start something and I'm going to have my current job help me facilitate what I'm passionate about and see if I can start getting traction.
Yeah.
And once they do, it's really exciting. And their day job, like you said earlier in the show, gets way more exciting because it's fueling what you're truly passionate about.
Yeah.
And that to me is smart. And you might have a different risk tolerance than your spouse. And if you do, you've got to be very careful to be going the slower risk tolerance of the 2 of you. Now that you guys are yoked together, you don't want to be pulling that cart by yourself.
Right.
I'll tell you that right now. So that's something that I would say in the past almost 100 episodes. Can I get a whoop whoop? Uh-huh. Thank you. That's what I've found is your spouse on board? If you're not, we got a problem, Houston.
we had that call this week, so I had a call like that this week.
I think I
Spouses are
know.
on different pages.
I think I know that. And so
Yeah.
a lot of it is almost counseling. Like, let's talk about it. Let's put a plan together in that the person that has a lower risk tolerance is comfortable with the checks and balances that are laid out to say, hey, if this hasn't been achieved by this time, we might be off track. But if it has been achieved, maybe we have something that can be pursued.
Right.
Anyway.
It's good.
I think that's a huge point, and I think and risk tolerances change. You know,
Good point.
I think my risk tolerance was huge when I moved out to Los Angeles. I mean, granted, I didn't go out and do the waiting tables thing. I had a job selling windows and doors for Pella. You know, so I had that. You know, but I will say that I am confident in myself, but there was a certain level of my confidence that got broke a little bit at Principal, and not anything that Principal did. You know, I probably didn't do some things that I should have done, but at the end of the day, I walked away from there in debt. You know, and so I bet on myself, and it didn't work. You know, and so that affects your risk tolerance as well. And so I had to build that back up. And you know, as we start talking about, you know, looking at these other opportunities, I can tell I've built my risk tolerance back up, and Jess's is still pretty low. You know,
gun-shy.
yeah, absolutely. And I respect that. And what you said is 100% accurate. Like, you've got to be on the same page before you do take the next big step. Mitch Matthews talks about your leap number. And I would encourage, I don't know what the episode is. I could find it pretty easily, but he does a podcast on your leap number.
That's
that
good.
To your point, I think it would be worth listening to, because he talks about what is that number that you're both comfortable with. And obviously there's a lot more that goes into it, because you know, it's a 45-minute podcast or whatever.
Word, because we always say like, oh, you're jumping off the bridge when you're going uncommon. Like, your parachute will open, but it's scary as ever.
Yeah.
And we always talk about that analogy. And I've never, truly to this day, have somebody jump off the proverbial bridge and not be happy they did it.
Right.
and their parachute opened. And what we always say is like, you can always land on another bridge. Like your parachute will open and people will surround you. And like, back to what I said, people love to help people.
Yep.
So Brian, talk to me. What's going on?
Well, I just want to know what, it's early 2022 shooting this, and what are you looking forward to in the new year? We're 21 days in. It's been a little bit of a hot mess, but
yeah.
What I think he said is like, you can work here anytime you want. At Uncommon Wealth Partners. I don't
exactly
know if you heard
said,
that,
yeah.
but I heard it.
Thanks for decoding that.
Sorry.
Sweet. Awesome. That's good to
Answer
know.
his
Hopefully
question.
my boss is listening.
No,
no,
we're
I'm
totally
teasing.
kidding.
He's
but
totally
not
joking.
really.
Hey, where do I sign? What I'm excited about in 2022 is continuing to do what I'm doing with the podcast, and actually I'm toying right now. Are you guys weekly or are you every other week?
No, we're every other week.
Okay.
except for that 1 month.
That 1 month had a little hiatus.
We had a little
Got it.
glitch.
which is
But
like
we're
the
back.
No,
number
that's-
one thing not to do, Tyler.
Is hiatus.
Yeah.
And so that's that's where I'm kind of toying right now is could I handle weekly? Is there a benefit in going weekly? Right now I've got a bunch lined up, so I'm like, yeah, let's go weekly, but then you hit a drought and you're like, "Brr, what do I do now?
We've talked about it a lot, but it's a big commitment.
And I think that because of that, and unless someone can show me like, hey, if you go weekly, you get this many more listeners, I'll probably stick with the bi-weekly. But that's one of the things that I'm looking at. And then how do I make that step into, promoting myself as a public speaker? And how do I start booking those gigs? I'm exploring what it would look like to do some coaching as well, outside of financial coaching, but sitting down and saying, hey, how do we put together a plan to do that? So, but then outside of that, I want to continue to focus on promoting myself in the voiceover and the acting world as well.
Yep.
I do have, I have local agents for that. And,
I saw you on a commercial the other day, actually.
you did.
Yes.
What was it for?
Was it MediaCom? Am I out of my mind?
I haven't done a MediaCom in quite a while, but I mean, they could have repurposed something.
Okay.
The crappy part about shooting non-union is they're like, hey, we really like this commercial. Let's throw it out there again.
Okay.
Whereas under SAG rules, then they have to pay you for, I did a 1 hour optical commercial, and the guys did a great job. There's a couple guys that I knew, one that was a friend and one that I got to know, but their whole premise was, hey, we're going to shoot. Look, you can tell the difference between local commercials and actually produced commercials.
Sure
and the difference, real quick sidebar, is the ones that you're like, oh my gosh, wow. That's typically the television station just produces it and like, hey, you buy ads from us, we'll produce the commercial for nothing or for $500. And then you've got these larger, not Universal, but the studios here, and I'm kind of doing they're studios, but the guys that are going to charge a good chunk of change to do a commercial. Well, these two guys had this idea like, hey, we're going to split the difference. We're going to shoot good quality stuff. We're going to use bare bones crews, and then we can make money and shoot good commercials. Anyway, I digress. We shot this 1 hour optical commercial. It's a funny commercial. It was great. I got paid next to nothing for it because they're like, hey, we'll do more of this. We'll pay you more. And I'm not mad at those guys at all. I'm not mad at 1 hour.
I'm not bitter at all.
No, really, I'm not. It's just funny that because we do this non-union, I saw that 1 hour optical commercial run for like almost 10 years. They ran it for like 8 years, and I think I got $100. So
Value.
That value, exactly. Good for her. It's a good commercial. But yeah. So that I digress. That's something that I try to, every night there's a website that has postings, casting notices from across the country. And so I will get on there and submit my headshot and resume, and had the opportunity. I just read a script last week for a film that's shooting in Kansas City in May. And, nice. Cool little sidebar there. Yeah. I auditioned. The guy responded, said, hey, I really like it. You're in our good pile is what he called it. So I'm, not a casting director. He's a writer and a producer, but he's like, who is your reader? And does she act? And I'm like, yeah, because my wife just read with me. And so then Jess got an audition. And then, he responded and like, hey, can you guys act together on screen? Or are you guys going to fight like cats and dogs if you're on set? I'm like, no, we can totally work together.
Totally make out. What?
So, yeah. It's supporting roles, but it's a lot of times with lower budget, like small local stuff, like I always ask to see the script because I'm like, is this just a heaping pile of garbage?
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to work for, peanuts,
Next to
I want to
nothing.
at least be
Like
in a
it.
cool project.
Yeah.
This script is awesome. Like
Really?
I was like,
that's
yes,
cool.
I will totally take a small supporting role in this movie just to be a part of it. So anyway,
that's cool.
I'm rambling, but that I'm staying focused on, chasing the acting and the voiceover stuff as well. And so, yeah, that's what I'm excited about in 2022.
Cool. Very good.
And then quickly, so what fuels your passion now? Like, where do you work that helps you provide for your family to then do what you want to do? Where do you work now?
Yeah, awesome. I am a senior private client advisor at Bank of the West.
Sounds
so
amazing.
It is amazing. So it's private banking, and when I introduce myself, I say private banker because a lot of times people hear private client advisor and they're like, oh no, we have a financial advisor. We already work with Brian and Philip. But I'm like, no, hang on. What I am actually more focused on is the banking side of things.
Dude, it's very important to have a good banker that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
By the way, so
Yeah,
I'll totally pay for that.
It is. So now I also am still securities licensed, and I do, when we start talking about the planning, when we start talking about investments, I'm a part of that conversation, but I bring a financial advisor to the table. So my focus is more on, hey, do we have you in the right products? Do we have the right, do we have the right checking and money market for you? If you're looking at a mortgage or a home equity line of credit, you get some discounts for being a part of our private banking group. And so that's kind of, that's what I do
Sweet,
now.
nice.
And so it's a great spot because I'm learning more about banking and learning more about lending while still staying active in that planning space and at least keeping my finger on the pulse of how that what changes are happening in that industry other than crypto, because nobody can do that unless they have an RIA.
That's true. It's funny because we always tell ourselves or tell some of our clients, like, I feel like we're more bankers than financial advisors. So that could really help you in the future. That's really good. So, okay, what are we going to do? Close this thing up, land the plane. What are we going to talk about? Brian Dewhurst, everyone.
What's the one guest you want to get on your podcast?
Oh,
Bob Goff.
Question. I just emailed him to be on our 100th episode. Oh my goodness.
I don't even need to think about that. Like Bob Goff. I think we actually talked a little bit about him when you guys were on my show, but we got Everybody Does for Kids. So he's got Everybody Does for Kids, and he's also got Love Does. Sorry, I'm combining two book titles.
Bob, just come to ours, not his.
Yeah, go to theirs first because they're on
I'll send them
episode
over.
100th, and then
we got a milestone here.
right. So Love Does for Kids is phenomenal. I forget how old your kids are, but my kids are just eating it up, and we're reading it after dinner. And I love it because it's all the stories from Love Does. So I'm like, oh, and then
This is a good one.
I'm like flipping ahead to see if this story's in there, and like the guy is just awesome. Like a friend of mine is actually going out to his writing workshop. In February or something with Kimberly Stewart. She's local.
Sweet.
They're starting to do these writing workshops together. So our friend Steph is going out there. I'm like, oh, you're gonna actually meet him?
That'd be neat.
And I'm like, oh yeah, there's like 200 people in the room, right? And she's like, no, I think they cap it at 15. I'm like, oh, you're gonna actually meet him. Like,
you're
this
gonna
is
be able to
awesome.
interact with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, he would definitely be, at the top of my list.
What would be the question you'd be most excited to ask him? Or is that too much? Is that too deep? Are we going too big down the rabbit hole? Adam Carroll, are we? I don't know. Here we are.
So, wow. Because I would love to hear what he wanted to be when he grew up. Like said, that's probably my favorite question that I ask my guests. And I think that would be, actually, another fun one would be for him, but he would probably take like 2 hours to answer it is, what goal or what dream haven't you reached yet?
Ooh.
Because you think about everything that guy has done, it would be nuts to know what's still kicking around in his brain that he hasn't accomplished yet.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd ask him, what does burnout look like for you? Like, honestly,
Yeah.
what does that, is it sustainable on where you're at? And have you ever hit that point where Sweet Maria was like tapped out over here?
Yeah, exactly. You're done,
interesting to see. Obviously, probably not what he would want to be talking about on our podcast, but it'd be something and I'd have to go somewhat uncommon. So I'd have
Oh,
to do something different.
You're
Yeah.
wired similar. You two are wired similar.
Very true.
Similarly to
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, you got to find a hook to get him too, right? Because he's got to get asked to be on 75 podcasts
Yeah.
every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
Tyler, you're amazing. Thanks for being introduced to your new best friend, Tyler Cameraman.
We did it.
I'm excited for just your show and your continued success to pour into other people, because it is powerful to be able to see people's passion and then see it realized. I don't
Yeah.
know if there's anything better, like seeing people like see their dreams come true.
Yeah.
And actually see it not being monetized, but almost being validated by other people that they're impacting.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we do? Like, this is the best thing ever, And so I would say that I feel like the wealthiest person in the world, because I get to impact other people every day to help them achieve something, to help them impact more people. Now, maybe not financially the wealthiest, but I feel like I'm the most wealthy because I get to see and have interactions that are impactful.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So,
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you guys.
Keep going.
Great hanging with you.
yeah, we'll do it again.
All right.
You've been listening to the Uncommon Life Project. I've been your host, Philip Ramsey.
I'm Brian Dewhurst.
Until next time, go be uncommon. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody.
That's all for this episode of the Uncommon Life Project, brought to you by Uncommon Wealth Partners. Be sure to visit uncommonwealth.com to learn more about our services. Don't miss an episode as we introduce you to inspiring people who are actively pursuing an uncommon life.